I think the funniest thing to come out of this, honestly, is all of the Philly fans saying James Harden was right. Um, uh, so I think they're cold, and I don't think they have a lot of places to go. And it's not just injuries, but injuries don't help when you have two of your top people are injury prone. I don't know what Daryl Morey does with his team, and quite frankly, I don't expect Daryl Morey to be the one making the decisions after this season as far as this team goes. That's where I sit on that. They're just a disappointment.
So you're saying Philadelphia is so bad they are helping James Harden's PR big time.
He's had a
um,
complete career renaissance, like as far as his what people think of him.
Welcome to another episode of In the Lab with Hoopsology. I am your host, Matt Thomas, and I am joined by my co-hosts. Whoa, we're going to get into that. Justin Goodrum and Allan Muenzler. Justin, how are you doing, man?
Doing well, surviving sub-zero temperatures. How about yourself?
Yeah, we're not quite sub-zero here in Albuquerque, but we're getting close. You have to think about Mortal Kombat when you say sub-zero, right? But we have important business to conduct on the show today. It's a great day for us. Reason being, as you heard, if you've been a listener to the show for a little while, it's been me and my co-host, and today I made that plural. We want to welcome Allan Muenzler onto the show. Allan, what's up, man? How are you doing?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me. Thanks for inviting me. Um, just flew in from New Orleans this weekend. I avoided the snow there, only to come into temperatures of the teens here. So it's probably the same story for everybody everywhere in the U.S. right now. It's just cold.
Yeah, even down south, I'm hearing things are being shut down. A buddy of mine in Austin, Texas, was sending me pictures of snow everywhere. So, those of you who are hardcore listeners of the show, you probably remember this isn't Allan's first appearance on our show. He actually helped us out and joined us for a really fun preseason preview episode a couple years back. And we are privileged to bring Allan onto the show just to add another great perspective into the content that we are pushing out for you guys. Another great viewer for us for the interviews that we focus on. And Allan, I guess, give us a little bit about your history with the sport of basketball. When did you start getting into basketball, and why do you like basketball?
Yeah, that's a tough question. I think, initially my big exposure was probably 1986. I'm an old head, so and it was the upstart Rockets. They beat the Lakers, they go to the finals against the Celtics, and then promptly get, spanked by them because that Celtics team was one of the all-time great basketball teams. So interest dropped off a little bit at that point, but I would say probably mid 90s, I really started paying attention. Um, my team growing up was the Rockets, so I was very, very interested in going there. Hakeem Olajuwon uh, was uh, was my guy. Um, I even went to the University of Houston because that's where Hakeem went. Also, they have a great creative writing program. So, but um, very very started following basketball like crazy, and not just the one team. Now, League Pass really wasn't a thing back then, but I would pick up those little digest books that would come out from uh, I want to say like Hoops Hype or something like that, or but they would have just really snarky things about each team and a breakdown at the season. They were like paperback books about 200, 300 pages long, and I would devour those and learn about all the different players and all that kind of stuff. So just really got into it, and for me, basketball is like when done right, it's like poetry in motion, right? You're watching different people move to different things and go to their assignments and help on defense, on offense, do back cuts. Um, uh, that kind of stuff has always appealed to me. It's a constantly flowing game, and you see something exciting in every game, whether it's, somebody gets hot from three or there's some sort of crazy dunk. There's just always some reason to watch any basketball game, uh, uh, except for some teams. I won't mention them here. We'll talk about that later. Um, I'm just kidding. They're all fun. So that's really, I've been watching basketball religiously since probably 90, 92, 93. So.
Awesome. Well, you will fit in well here, and we are so glad to bring you in and introduce you on the show. And for today's topic, we're going to get to know a lot more about your thoughts as well as Justin's and maybe some of mine on our NBA teams. Our main topic today, boys, and I want to jump right into it because there's a lot to unpack here. I figure it's the midpoint of the season. We have teams even just past the midpoint of the season as far as the number of games that they've played. And so I want to check in and basically give a little NBA, how's it going? And I think the best way to do this is through a temperature check. So for each team, I want to know your guys' thoughts on if they're hot, if this team is a contender, or I don't know, very, very good, very, very close to contention, or we'll say contender. Or if they're warm, if you feel kind of good about their progress, maybe even if they're outside that play-in tournament window, maybe you just feel good about the team. Let me know that if they're warm. And if you're baffled or if this team is just stinking and it looks a little bit hopeless, then we'll go ahead and say they're cold. If it's really bad, you can go ahead and give them the ice cold too if you want. I'll leave that up to you guys. But let's jump right into this, our NBA temperature check. And Allan, since this is your first episode, I'm going to throw it to you first. We're going to start in the Eastern Conference. We're going to go from the bottom up. I think I know what you're going to say maybe, but maybe you'll surprise. I don't know. We'll start at 15th, the Washington Wizards. How are we feeling temperature-wise?
I hate to be wishy-washy. It depends on what the goal for the Washington Wizards this season is. If it's to get into the Cooper Flag sweepstakes, they're warm. But, as far as being a cold team, I think they're cold. Although I will say Jordan Poole has improved his play this season, looking more like the guy that played at Michigan. They've balanced that out, though, by Kyle Kuzma throwing up a all-time stinker season so far. So cold, but warm for the Cooper Flag sweepstakes.
Yeah, that is an interesting factor I didn't mention is, there is a certain point in tanking where maybe it does give you a little bit of warmth. Justin, we'll throw to you. What are your thoughts on the Washington Wizards?
Yeah, I concur. My only issue is, if they are going to be the worst team in the NBA and get Cooper, is whether or not they can actually build a team around him. I mean, they failed with John Wall. They failed with Bradley Beal. I mean, we've seen other teams at this point really do a solid job of building through the draft, kind of taking somewhat that blueprint of the Sixers and applying it to their own team. And I think the Wizards are pretty incompetent. So I'm going to say ice cold at this point, even though they're up to their plan. I just think the organization kind of needs a reawakening, similar to what the Commanders went through, and now look what's happening to them. So maybe they can kind of take a look at their football brethren in terms of some inspiration for improvement. So I'm not so hot on the Washington Wizards at this point.
Man, way to inspire some hope there, Justin. I
Right.
love it. Go ahead, let's continue. And Justin, go ahead, give me your thoughts on temperature for the Toronto Raptors, a team we've talked about a lot recently on the show.
Yeah, we had the guys from Hello Welcome on our show recently. They didn't seem too optimistic about the Raptors. It was kind of, they covered the Raptors as their main podcast.
They kind of apologized for them.
They
I mean,
did.
Very, very Canadian of them
And that is
to go to
a
that
theme.
stereotype,
As we go
unfortunately.
through the standings here, it's going to be a theme of the experts that we've had on because they're apologizing for their teams. So it's based on their I would say lackluster expectations so far. I'm going to go ice cold on the Raptors. I think they're still trying to find an identity that's based on their previous past. I think there's still a hangover just from their 2019 title win that they have not gotten over. And at this point, they are struggling. So, again, pretty ice cold on the Raptors as well.
What do you think, Alan?
I agree. Ice cold. I think they probably were hoping to be better this year, and not be in the running for Cooper Flag. I think, yeah, and I don't know what their forward looks like. They've got a lot of money tied up with some guys who I think aren't the guys. So.
Right on. Let's keep moving right into, Alan, I'll go right back to you for your thoughts on the Charlotte Hornets. Maybe my favorite jerseys in the NBA are certainly up there, but not performing as well on the court. How do you feel about temperature for the Hornets?
Well, Matt, if you put one of those jerseys on, you're going to give yourself hypothermia. They are ice cold. They didn't bring Charles Lee in to be a bottom 3 team in the East. I think they're headed in the wrong direction, and they think they need some direction.
Justin, do you agree?
Yeah, I concur. We had James Plowright on recently. He covers the Hornets for Sports Illustrated for their podcast. Again, kind of with the Raptors deal, not optimistic at all. I think the LaMelo experiment has been, I think, a failure, I would say, despite the attention. So, again, it's kind of time to reassess where is this franchise going to be in the next 5 years. And I don't think LaMelo's in the future of their plans, in my opinion.
Hey, LaMelo, great for those TikTok highlights, but hey, what do TikTok highlights even mean at this point? I don't know. Everything's different. Justin, go ahead, stay with me for temperature for the Brooklyn Nets.
Yeah, they're a tricky team.
Yeah.
I don't have too much thoughts on them. And maybe Alan can shed some light on this. I really don't know what their plans are as a franchise. I wonder with them and Chicago as well. The Sixers are kind of in a different situation because they're just a massive disappointment. Spoiler, but with the Nets. I'm curious with kind of all their trades. What exactly is their objective? Are they in a similar situation where they're trying to tank? But it's so weird because at this point, I don't see them being competitive to be in the play-in tournament. But yeah, I don't think they're good. I think they're enough to play hard every night to not be one of the worst teams in the NBA. So what is their objective overall as a franchise, especially seeing the Liberty, just seeing how they have done and their WNBA counterparts, just wondering with the Nets kind of what is their overall kind of plans for the next few years.
So, Justin, is that a confused cold that I'm feeling?
Yeah, very confused
Okay.
cold at this point. Yeah, correct.
Alan, what do you think?
I'm warm on the Nets. Last year,
Ooh, I like
ice
it.
cold. They were going nowhere. This year, they don't have the talent yet, but they have positioned themselves. The Harden trade to Philly is going to net them some really strong draft capital. Getting their picks back from Houston for the Phoenix picks gives them more immediate draft capital, and they don't have to worry about trying to win. I think they're good enough that it's hard for them to tank. And they've got those Knicks picks, which we all know. Well, we'll get to the Knicks later. But I think those Knicks picks could be at least valuable trade chips at some point. So I'm warm. I like Jordi Fernandez. So I think I'm warm on him.
All right. I like that. They are an interesting team to look at. And they do still have things they can do. You mentioned that mobility with the picks that they've accrued. So maybe a sneaky warm team. I don't know where I sit on it either. I guess maybe confused would be my my temperature on them as well, Justin. But Alan, I'll throw right back to you for maybe the most disappointing team this season, arguably, the Philadelphia 76ers, who sit at 11th in the East right now. Paul George recently saying that he's bored, I guess, and a lot of other things in the headlines. Alan, obviously there's a sense of doom and gloom around the team, but how do you feel temperature-wise with the 76ers?
I think the funniest thing to come out of this, honestly, is all of the Philly fans saying James Harden was right. Um, uh, so I think they're cold, and I don't think they have a lot of places to go. I and it's not just injuries. But injuries don't help when you have two of your top people are injury prone. Um, uh, I I don't know what Daryl Morey does with this team, and quite frankly, I don't expect Daryl Morey to be the one making the decisions after this season, as far as this team goes. Um, uh, that's where I sit on it. They're just a disappointment.
So you're saying Philadelphia is so bad they are helping James Harden's PR big time.
He's had a complete career renaissance, like
Yeah,
as far as his what people think of him.
that's true. That's true. Justin, how are you feeling about the 76ers?
Yeah, I agree. I think they're pretty ice cold. And a question I want to ask, does Nick Nurse make it through this season? I mean, I'm not optimistic just based on, again, talking to the Hello Welcome guys and what his tenure was in Toronto, just in terms of his demeanor and then them struggling and the coach is the scapegoat. I mean, is he gone? I mean, at this point, there's such a. I mean, Embiid's a franchise player. You get Paul George, Tyrese Maxey. I mean, the expectations for them to contend and that they're not even in the ballpark of that. So, you know how that goes. The coach is expendable first. So, I don't know. I think this franchise is in real trouble. I think Embiid, I have to say, he got plenty of run in the Olympics. I was not impressed by his effort. I mean, I've been a big Embiid guy ever since he got into the league. I mean, Matt knows. I mean, I was really happy with him, and we played fantasy basketball. I really enjoyed his output, but I just think kind of his effort. And again, a buddy of ours, Josh, I mean, he always points this out because he lives in the Denver area. Whenever the Sixers come to play Denver, he's mysteriously hurt. I mean, he has a streak of not coming to play Jokic. I mean, that's not a coincidence. I just question this guy's heart. I mean, this guy wants to be the man, and he wants to, be the franchise, and he talks a lot of crap, but I don't see him really backing it up at this point, and I've kind of lost hope.
No, good points. I mean,
hate to say that.
At bare minimum, it's a bad look.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I mean, at least for all his playoff struggles, Harden showed up. He may not played well, but he didn't duck anything.
Agreed. Yep.
So we've covered the non-play-in teams for the Eastern Conference, at the moment anyway, the non-play-in teams at this halfway point of the season. So we're going to move over to the Leftern Conference, the Western Conference, and start there. Number 15, the Utah Jazz. I think an interesting worst team in their conference, if nothing else. Justin, how are you feeling about the Jazz?
I feel the opposite. I don't think they're interesting at all.
Okay,
bored with
that's
team.
fair.
The Pelicans I'm interested in, even though they stink. But the Jazz, not so much. I'm like, all right. I feel bad for them because I feel like they're on the come up, especially during that year where they had the All-Star game, and I forgot the journalists we talked to during that year. But it just seems like Utah had a lot of momentum with this basketball culture within that city, but it seems like they've lost it. So I think they're ice cold at the moment.
I did hear before we started recording that the Jazz may be involved in a 3-team deal with the Suns.
Really?
There's some draft picks involved. I don't think anything's official yet, but keep your eyes on the Jazz. Allan, your thoughts on the Jazz? Hopefully I didn't spoil what you were going to say.
Yeah, I was just going to bring up, they just traded, they consolidated their pick swaps, I think, that they got from the Gobert and Mitchell trades. And they're a bunch of first-round swaps and first-round picks. And they sent those to the Suns for 3 first-rounders for the Suns. So the Suns are trying to go all in on Jimmy. So for me, Utah at least is starting to stockpile some assets. They've got some interesting young players. I mean, they've had some, obviously injuries have hurt them quite a bit. They're cold, but they're warm for the Cooper flag. And I mean, I don't know if the NBA draft is rigged, Cooper Flag will end up in Utah, because he seems like a Utah kind of guy. He'd be really popular there. Um, just so yeah.
Do you fear if you're another NBA GM, Allen? Do you have a fear of Danny Ainge? Is he in that category of GM where you're worried about trading with him?
I I'm worried about trading with him because he does not negotiate and he overvalues every asset that he has. It goes back to his Boston days. Now he was able to make it work there by preying on people's desperation. Um, but I don't know that I fear his deal making necessarily. You're never surprised. I don't think he surprises you.
Gotcha. Um, Staying with you, Alan, give me your temperature on the Pelicans, who Justin just brought up. How are you feeling about them right now? I mean, we know the injury woes. They've won four straight as of the time we recorded this podcast, but their record is 12-32. So it does seem like the season's lost at this point. How do you feel about this team?
So I was just did a tour of the Garden District in New Orleans
Yeah.
this past weekend, and one of the houses that we stopped and looked at, just the outside, is Zion Williamson's house there in the Garden District. He and his fiance have bought a house. They're fixing it up. They're putting in like they're building it out and got special permission to build out part of it to put in like a full weight room and full entertainment center. But it's also going to be the house for his mother. That being said, I think obviously the Pelicans are cold. They're ice cold. I don't know what they do. They're the trades they've made have been most trades aren't disastrous for both teams or for either team. But in the case of the Pelicans, they've made some just disastrous trades over and over again. And I don't know what their future looks like. Zion's health is always going to be an issue, it seems like. Um, Brandon Ingram is a free agent and is could be dealt if anybody wants KD light for the rest of the season. Um, and like really light. Um, uh, yeah, ice cold on the Pelicans. I'm not sure what they do or where they're going.
Yeah, it's a sad ice cold for me. Just really depressed with Zion. I have a distinct memory with him. It's around beginning of dating my girlfriend. I put on Zion as his NBA debut. And I just think from there, it's just like I was hyping up this guy so much, and then he's just hurt, and it's just one controversy after another. And it's such a shame because I think he could be one of the most premier talents in the league, and then just at some point he has to take some personal accountability, and it's such a shame. And it really is, I think, sadder than like a Greg Oden situation or like another. You hear a big man who gets hurt early in their career, and it's the rest of their career is over. I think this is worse. I just think this guy has so much potential to be the face of the league. I mean, that's what we were talking about when he was first drafted, and just to see how it plays out, it's terrible. Um, I know we got to get to the other teams, but it's a question for both of you. Is there any kind of hope if he gets traded to kind of revive his career, or do you think this is just kind of how he is?
Alan, you want to go first?
I think that's a tough question. I mean, I want to say yes, he gets traded and he revitalizes his career, and then the other part of me thinks he's just Oliver Miller 2.0.
Oh man.
Yeah. Yeah, good way to put it. I said 2 years ago on our show, Justin, you can verify. I thought the Pelicans should have traded Zion 2 years ago.
You did say that.
Um,
That's true.
and I still feel that way. If well, now's not a great time. If he has any sort of good stretch, I would trade him personally. I do not. I have to say I do not have faith in the rest of his career. Of course, I never root for a player to tank like that or be a potential bust of a draft pick. Like you said, Justin, you can see the talent is there and all those things. We have a long enough track record at this point. I really don't think there's turning it around. But I hope to see that, of course. Um, getting back to our temperatures here, the Portland Trailblazers. I can't remember where I ended. I ended with you, Justin. So why don't you give me your temperature for the Portland Trailblazers?
Yeah, the Blazers, I would say, on the come up. I think they have a lot of decent young talent. I'm curious to talk to Danny Meringue, who covers the Trailblazers. We haven't talked to him in a long time. He's our Trailblazers insider, and just he went over just a lot of the drama with just their front office and Damian Lillard. And I'm curious to see if they have fully moved on from that era to kind of usher in kind of the next steps of this franchise. So at this point, I would say I don't think they're in contention. So I would say ice cold, but kind of optimistic for the future. I've heard their names come up just in terms of some good things, just in terms of kind of their young roster. So I'm excited to see that, and just excited kind of to see their next transformation of this franchise. Because Damian Lillard left a huge shadow. I mean, he was the face of that team for so long, and that's hard to overcome. So I'm cautiously optimistic that they can kind of figure it out.
How do you feel, Alan?
I agree. I'll just real briefly just say I like a lot of their young talent. I think somebody like Scoot is going to take 3 years before he really gets it. That's a point guard. That's just point guard in the NBA is the hardest position to learn. I think it's going to take him a little bit. I think I love Shadon Sharp. I actually think he's a future All Star. I think they need to trade Anthony Simons as soon as they can for whatever they can get because I think that guy is just he's just a shooter. And they've got some young big men who I think are really potentially good players. They're in this mid range right now. They're not tanking, but they're just not good enough yet. So they still need some either trades or draft capital to start moving into warm. So they're cold for me, but with some positives.
Yeah, it's interesting. Just to interject real quick, I do feel a little more positive, a little warmer, I guess, on the Jazz than either the Trailblazers or the Pelicans, just because of the asset pool. But you guys bring up good points about their young talent. Maybe I need to be a little bit more optimistic on the Scoot Henderson project and their future there. Alan, staying with you, I think this may be an easy team, or maybe there's some sneaky nuance here we're not seeing, but the 12 position San Antonio Spurs, obviously first talking point is Wemby and how awesome he is, but how you feeling temperature-wise about the team, Alan?
I actually think they're moving in the right direction. I mean, I think it's going to be hard for them not to.
Yeah.
They've got a smart front office, smart coaching staff. I mean, we've seen Mitch Johnson step in and I think do a pretty good job. I mean, his rotations are kind of, but he's learning, and that's all you can ask for. And that's a very stressful situation for him to be stepping into. I mean, Wemby's great. I think Stephon Castle's getting tutored by Chris Paul. Chris Paul's having a career resurgence. I thought he was done last year. But he's top 10 in assists. I think, I don't know if he still is, but he was when I looked a few weeks ago. So I think they're moving in the right direction, and they've got some draft assets. They've got a lot of picks.
Yeah, good things. Justin, how do you feel about the Spurs?
Yeah, I agree. Just to keep it moving. I'll just add with Popovich, it seems like he's set to make his return. This was breaking today. It says here from the Spurs CEO that he's been improving weekly. He suffered a stroke towards the start of the season, but they don't know when he's going to be back, but he'll be back at some point. So that'll be a huge lift for this team when he does return. And I'm just impressed with Victor Wembanyama. I just think he is a phenom in this league. And I just hope, compared to the Joker, which we'll talk about way later on, that the league markets him effectively. And they don't punish him because he is an international player. Because I just feel like with the Joker, that has been the case. And he has been. Matt and I have just talked about how incredible he is. And yet I don't think the league promotes him enough, and your casual basketball fans probably don't even know who he is. And he's one of the best players. He could be in the running to be one of the best players of all time, and you don't even know who the guy is. I mean, that is a catastrophic failure for this league in terms of marketing, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, he's the defensive player of the year so far. And it's the second year. It's insane.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he might hold that for like a decade. We'll see what
Yeah.
happens.
Sure.
Last team here among the outside of the play-in tournament looking in for the Western Conference, a team that I think is interesting because we're used to tying their brand right now over the past decade with a lot of success. But another trying year and some aging superstars here, an aging legend in Steph Curry. Justin, of course, I'm talking about the Golden State Warriors. How are you feeling with them temperature-wise at this point?
I don't think they're ice cold. I think they're right where I think they were supposed to be during this point of the season, in my opinion, kind of at that mid-level point. And I'm just wondering, is Steph Curry like really past his prime? I mean, I don't think he's not MVP Steph Curry, but is he washed? I don't think he is, in my opinion. So I just think again with this franchise, I think it's kind of I don't know. I think Draymond is kind of a anchor on this team. I was kind of in the camp of keeping him a few years ago, but at this point, I think he is past his prime, and I think it's just time to get rid of him. But I don't know how much trade value they're going to get just with his value. Um, and again, I think there's still some years left with Steph Curry. I think he still can be a force in this league. I really do. So overall, again, they're in mediocrity until they can kind of, reset and rebuild. And I think they made. You talk about some terrible just decisions. I think the Warriors have made some terrible decisions too, just based on just picks and just trades. I don't think they've done a really good job of retooling.
So sounds like you're feeling a little more on the cold side, but not ice
Correct.
cold for the
Yeah.
Warriors. Alan, how do you feel about this franchise?
I'm cold on them. I don't think they let Clay walk if they didn't think they were still going to be contenders. Um, I think I don't think this season's gone to plan. Honestly, they started off hot, but I'm just gonna let the Rockets take credit. When the Rockets finally beat them for the like to avoid loss 17 in a row or whatever it was, it it seemed like it broke the Warriors at that point, and they've been kind of just broken since then. Don't know if they get that back near the end of the season. Justin, I think Steph is still going to have some good games, but I think he's on that downward trajectory. And I think uh, a guard like him doesn't necessarily age well if he has to keep doing a lot of the quick things that he has to do. Now, if he's like his dad and can just spot up on the 3-point line and catch stuff from a big center, he can have a long. He'll be fine. But shot creator Steph Curry is I think not going to be a consistent force.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that we're seeing too, great point, Alan, is that Curry has always relied on a lot of talent around him, and he enhances that talent around him very much. But I think, in addition to the natural aging process that occurs no matter who you are, the talent around him has decreased as well, and that's I think amplifying this sort of downward spiral they've been in. I think I still say Justin knows my take on this, but it was really a pretty big accomplishment that they won it all in 2022. It's pretty shocking that they won that title, all things considered, with where they were, what was going on. So I think they deserve a lot of kudos for that. I want to stay in the West because we have some more spicy teams coming, like these next three teams on the list, even the next five that I'm going to go into, and this is the teams that fall into the play-in tournament category if the season were to end today, and we're going to stay with the very aggressive, maybe to a fault, Phoenix Suns. And Alan, I want your thoughts on their temperature right now. We could see them get Jimmy Butler in a few weeks, or tomorrow. Who knows with the Suns, and are they going to overplay their hand? With all that chaos in mind, where do you set their temperature right now, Alan?
Cold, and the Suns, the moves they're making right now remind me of the early teens Brooklyn Nets.
Mm.
Uh, Trading everything to get old aging superstars to make a big run. I I'm cold on him. I think Beal's done. I think KD is still KD and he's holding up, but I just think the pieces around him and Booker are not good. And I just, I don't know that Jimmy Butler's going to add a lot to that either.
Man, shout out to Prokhorov, who was the Nets owner at that time. I wonder what he's up to, probably on a yacht somewhere or something.
Right.
Justin, how are you feeling about the Phoenix Suns?
I echo Allan's sentiments, and I think you have to really question, what's it, Matt Ishiba's just kind of overall vision for the Suns. I will say, give him props for his concession prices, $2 on every single concession price. So he's on point in terms of you want popcorn or hot dogs and not spending a fortune if you attend a Suns game. So give him props for that. But running this franchise, I agree with everything Allan says. I think it's a sinking ship.
Well, and you might need extra popcorn and hot dogs, so it's
Right.
good that he lowered the prices because you
Yeah.
might need to stress eat your way through this team. No, I'm just kidding. Justin, stay with me on the Minnesota Timberwolves, a team that sort of blew it up in a way, at least with a major piece. Obviously, we've talked about the Cat trade on this show, and they're sitting at ninth when I think you and I in our preseason predictions had them much higher than this. How do you feel about them, though? They still have some young talent on this team. There's still maybe opportunity for them to turn it around, maybe not. What do you think their temperature is right now?
It's such a shame. And I wonder for Anthony Edwards if all that talk about him being the next Michael Jordan, which that was just insanity, that was even a sentence to be even uttered. But I wonder if that really got to him. And I just kind of see this team, that trade that happened with Randall and Cat. I mean, we know which team made out as the victor in that trade. And I think that's really hurt the Timberwolves, unfortunately. I think they had a lot of momentum and they traded away their franchise player. And I'm happy for Cat, to be honest. I think with Karl Anthony Towns, we'll talk about the Knicks later, but he wasn't treated the greatest there. I mean, that goes back to Jimmy Butler, just the fans, just like he was treated like crap, I think, and not really valued. And I think some of that goes to with Cat. I realize he needs to own that, but I do think that karma's come back around, and it's really kind of bit the Timberwolves in the butt in terms of just his franchise. And I don't think they're going to recover. I don't think Julius Randle's been a great fit. And yeah, I think Anthony Edwards. I hate the threes. I think this guy is such a force. He's mean. And I just think when he's just shooting threes, you're just kind of taking the meanness away from him. I mean, he's best when he is vicious, when he is trying to talk trash and take your soul. And if shacking up threes, he's not doing that. And I see that him doing that this season. I think it's kind of that's not who he is.
Thank you for bringing that up. That was going to be my my addition on the Timberwolves. You're absolutely right. I mean, it's just disappointing because he's so good at going to the hoop and creating that. And you wonder, too, if part of that is the spacing that Karl Anthony Towns provided going away from that team a bit. Makes the lane a little bit more clogged up for him to drive and be successful there. Allan, how do you feel about the Timberwolves?
Oh, I'm cold. They had a miracle run to the Western Conference Finals. I just, yeah, I think it's a shame, and I think, look, I am one of those people. My hot take is that in most trades, both teams or all teams win because they get something that they're looking for. Whether or not it actually works out is fine. In this case, I still don't understand this trade. Is it a cost savings because of the whole ownership fiasco in Minnesota? Is it, I just, from a basketball operations perspective, I don't know why you take a space creator and gravity creator like Karl Anthony Towns and trade him for somebody who clogs up the lane and, quite frankly, is like, his nickname should be like the black hole because once the ball goes in, it doesn't come out. You're just not getting any, the passing that Towns brought, the court awareness. Towns at his best plays like a young Chris Webber. At his best. At his worst, he's plays like an old Chris Webber. But I think I'm cold on the Wolves, and I don't think they get out of it.
Yeah, I'm pretty cold too, and I don't know. I think there's something to not changing things up when you're in like a historically losing team and you finally have success. That's where I think I'm most baffled. I'll be honest, I didn't hate the trade initially, but man, you really see the consequences playing out, and that's not the only factor, of course. But a team that's on sort of that same narrative is the Sacramento Kings. I mean, again, a historically pretty losing franchise, lighten the beam like crazy last year, crazy good record compared to where they normally place. And now they're sitting just above, I mean, a half game above the Timberwolves. Allan, how are you feeling about the Sacramento Kings now?
This is tough. I think they've been playing better since Mike Brown was fired, but I don't think it was Mike Brown's fault that they were where they were. Um, I think there's some roster construction issues. I think there's some players who are shooting well below. I mean, Kevin Herter has dropped off of a cliff. Um, and so even Keegan Murray has had some early season struggles. And I think I, I want to be warm on the Kings, but I think I'm cold on the Kings because I always expect them to be a little bit better. And uh, I think even if they make the playoffs or the play in, I think relying on Sabonis to be the guy is going to have the same results as it did the last time they were in the playoffs and they were relying on Sabonis.
Justin, your thoughts?
Yeah, no, I agree. Such a disappointment for DeMar DeRozan too. Like everybody says, he's just kind of became a shell of himself. I mean, I don't buy that he's gotten terrible in 1 year. I mean, to me, he was great in Chicago. I mean, despite how Chicago performed, I don't think that was his fault. He won a lot of games for them. He had a career resurgence in Chicago. So I think you're right, Alan. Just the roster construction, I don't think he's a great fit. And yeah, it's unfortunate. And I mean, Doug Christie's a band aid. I don't think this is a long term solution. Just with all the drama you hear about like who's being benched and stuff leaking, like that's just never good. But I will say, despite all the drama, I mean, they're still in contention. I mean, they're the eighth seed, so they're not totally ice cold. But I think long term, I think they're headed towards a cliff. But this season, I think they'll do okay. But long term, I do foresee a lot of issues for sure.
Yeah, I mean, how much can your ceiling really raise when you're talking about like Sabonis? We kind of know who he is,
Yeah.
and he's a nice player. DeRozan, I mean, he's heading towards the tail end of his career.
Yes.
Fox, maybe there's some room for a little bit of growth, but I think we kind of know who all these players are. So well said on all those points, guys. Let's go to a team that was in the NBA Finals last year. They're sitting at the seventh seed. Of course, Luka's been hurt recently, and he's also been robbed, as we discussed, unfortunately. The Dallas Mavericks, of course. Justin, how are you feeling about the Mavericks right now? Are you worried about that seventh seed, or do you still feel pretty warm or even hot about this team?
Once they get healthy, I think they got a decent shot at moving up the standings. I'm not really in love with really any of these teams besides OKC. I feel like, you go 2 through, I would say 7, you can kind of interchange them once everybody's healthy. I don't think one team is better than the other. I mean, and there's some teams I'm instantly biased against, like the Clippers we'll get to later. I don't care if the Clippers win every game till the rest of the season. There's foreshadowing, is what I'm going to say later. But in terms of the Mavericks, they have been hit with injuries. You're right, Matt. And I do think when they get healthy, I do see them leapfrogging a couple of teams. In terms of their playoff chances, I'm not totally optimistic in terms of Kyrie and Luca, but I think during the regular season, I think they can make some magic happen just in terms of that kind of continuity. And they have Klay Thompson too, who has been solid for them as well. So I would say kind of lukewarm on the Mavericks.
Dang, it's going to be tough for these teams to earn a hot rating from Justin, it sounds like.
Right.
But fair enough. Good reasoning. Alan, how are you feeling about the Mavericks?
I think last year they uh, uh, outperformed their expectations. I don't
Mm.
think they were a finals team. Um, I think they had some lucky breaks, and I think they played above what they were. That being said, injuries have hurt them obviously this year. I think it all depends on Luca. Um, but I'm probably closer to cold on them. Uh, uh, I would just love to see Quentin Grimes get more playing time to find out if he is actually this lockdown defender that it looks like he could be. And he played for Kelvin Sampson's Cougars, and Kelvin Sampson has gushed about Quentin Grimes over and over again, how hard he works. So I actually don't doubt that. I think if Quentin Grimes finds the right spot, he could be the perennial 3-and-D guy that can help a team win a championship. Um, I don't think that's this year's Dallas Mavericks.
Wow. You guys are both colder on the Mavericks than I am, to be honest. But hey, that's okay. That's interesting. And I think it's fair. It's tough to judge with them sitting on that 7 spot right now. We'll see how the rest of the season plays out. Allan, stick with me and give me your temperature on a team everyone has talked about a lot because LeBron James plays for them and because it's the Lakers. The Lakers, how are you feeling temperature-wise with them?
I think they got to turn the ball over to Bronny and have him just play 48 minutes a game. Um, so that's no, the Lakers are actually doing better than I thought they were going to do this season. I'm uh, I won't say pleasantly surprised, but I'm a little surprised that they've been able to hang. I thought they were going to be more in the where the Warriors are, the Warriors and the Suns are. So I'm warm on the Lakers. I think they've figured some things out. Um, uh, I think there's been pretty decent health this year, which is a big factor when you've got AD and 40-year-old LeBron. Um, I think the Russell trade was a good move. Um, so I'm I'm warm on them. I don't think they're contenders by any stretch, but I think they'll be a tough first round out for sure.
Right on. Justin, your thoughts on the Lakers?
I agree. I'm warm on them. I think what LeBron James has done is amazing. I still think Anthony Davis is a factor. I have to say I'm disappointed with Dalton Connect. I had higher expectations for him as a rookie. Maybe that's delusional thinking on my part just because of the roster, but I'm impressed with Austin Reeves as well. And I have to say, for all the crowd, JJ Redick got his coach, and it's a bummer that he lost his home due to the wildfires. I think he's doing a pretty solid job. I don't know why he became the coach of the Lakers, to be honest, just because he has enough money, a podcast empire, and a lot more just, I guess, his mental health. My guess would probably be better not coaching the Lakers. He just seems more in agony, but, that's what he wants. That's what he wants. So I agree, Alan, they have exceeded my expectations.
Yeah.
Man,
Hey, Justin, you could be the next coach of the Nuggets, so be careful.
Oh, no, I never. I don't think so.
I gotta say, I'm colder on the Lakers than both of you guys, but I do strongly agree that they've exceeded expectations. And great points by both of you. We're gonna move back over to the Eastern Conference for their 10 through 6, and we're gonna go. Appropriately so. We'll start with you, Justin, and this, of course, being your team, the Chicago Bulls.
Ugh,
I think I know what you're going to say before you even say it.
I'm gonna
I could
say.
probably
You
do this
both know.
segment for you, but
Probably.
but go ahead,
You
give us
know.
your temperature.
We're running a little bit long, so I'm not gonna spend too much time on this. You know what I'm gonna say. I say this every time when we have an expert. They echo my sentiments. This team needs to blow it up, and it's just like it's kind of. I hate it because every time the Bulls are discussed, it's just Zach LaVine's having a great stretch. He's doing pretty good. Look at Vucevic, he's doing pretty well. Look at Kobe White, he's doing pretty solid. What are they gonna do? Look at Lonzo. It's just like this team needs to be blown up and start over from scratch. They need to be terrible for like 5 years and build through the draft. That's what it comes down to. And it's to play these games or just being in a play-in tournament or just being the 7th seed. It's a waste of, I think, a lot of Bulls fans' time. I'm just kind of sick of it at this point. So that's my rant.
Alan, how do you feel about this team, the Chicago
Ice
Bulls?
cold.
Ice cold. They need a new coach, new front office, and new players.
Oh
Concur.
man, a total rehaul coming to Chicago. Justin and Allen can only hope. I can't say I disagree with any of that. So let's keep it moving. And the surprising the culture change, maybe Detroit Pistons. Allen, give us your thoughts on them, if you would, please.
Warm. I like the Pistons. They're where the Rockets were last year. They're surprising people. They're hovering around the in that 500 area. Their Cade is playing well. He's still, maybe not the most efficient player, but he's doing well enough. I like the Pistons. I think they've got a bright future.
Justin, how about you?
I agree. Warm, and I'm proud of them. I mean, this is a team we covered last year. They're the worst team in the league, but yet, Matt's brought this up. They were one of our highest rated videos. They have a dedicated fan base. They want that team to do well. And they want all the sports franchises to do well. And I'm sure they need to pick me up after the Lions got bounced. So
rough.
Just happy for the Pistons. At least there's some positive momentum on their side. And this young roster is finally seeing their potential. Because really, besides, I think, the Celtics, and I will get to the Cavs later, I think there's a lot of room for growth in terms of kind of a new hierarchy, within the NBA. And I think the Pistons can fall into that, especially what we're going to talk about with the Heat.
It's kind of cool how the Pistons are intertwined with the Rockets in terms of fanhood. I mean, you've got the Thompson brothers, you've got the draft with Cade and Jalen Green, and I don't know, it's kind of a interesting little sub story, but we're not here to talk about that. Let's move right on with a team just riddled with drama and gossip and players getting benched and suspended, and I don't know, a whole lot of stuff going on in South Beach right now. Justin, how are you feeling about the Heat? Is it worth panicking over all this Jimmy Butler stuff, or is it maybe there's a bright horizon to come? How do you feel?
I think it's time to move on. I hated Jimmy Butler being suspended. I just thought that was stupid. I'm a big advocate, and I despise when players and coaches get suspended for what they have to say. I think it's stupid. I understand we live in America. I understand they sign contracts and all that, but the way that players get suspended for what they have to say, besides language, and I mean, that's separate, but just in terms of just, when coaches complain about the refs, or when Butler says, he wasn't cursing out Pat Riley. He wasn't saying Eric Spoelstra is a piece of garbage. He was expressing a wanting to trade, and he got suspended. I just think I think that's ridiculous. I think, to me, at least he was a man enough to admit it, compared to other players that oh, I want to be here, and then behind closed doors saying I want to leave. At least he was upfront, so I give the man credit for that. So, to me, I think, and usually it's tricky with the Heat. Through the history of this podcast, I've underestimated them, and then they surprise me. But I think this year I'm actually going to be right, where I think once they get rid of Butler, they're headed down to kind of have some soul searching to do.
Justin, how dare you for saying all of that? You are suspended for the rest of this show. And we'll talk later. Just kidding, of course. Allen, what's your temperature on the Heat?
Let's pour one out for the Heat culture.
Right.
Oh, no.
It's done. It's Jimmy Butler has destroyed Heat culture, and I'm glad to see it go. Because I didn't think it was a real thing anyway. I think the Heat are cold. I think they're as weak as Tyler Hero getting thrown across the floor.
And so fittingly, the only team with any sort of temperature is a hot temperature, but in all our eyes, because I agree, the Heat are cold. Let's stick with you, Allen, for the Orlando Magic, a team with still a lot of tenacity, a lot of youth, though, some struggles here and there, but I think overall they are still impressing to a lesser degree than last year. But there's been, as with many teams, injury bug and stuff like that. How do you feel about the Orlando Magic?
Oh, I'm still warm on the Magic. I think they have a bright future. I think they've got a lot of great talent. I think, again, Matt, you talked about it, injuries. I think Jamal Mosley's done a great job. I mean, they have G League King Trevelyan Queen starting and hitting game winners for them. I mean, that's a testament to good coaching and a team that has good culture and plays together and like a family. So I'm warm on the Magic. I don't think this is their year, because of the injuries, but I'm super warm, and I think Paolo's awesome.
Well said. All right, Justin, you are unbanned from the show. You're back in the mix.
Appreciate
What's
it.
your temperature on
Yeah.
the Magic?
I'm out of timeout. Much appreciated. Concur with Allan. Concur with Paolo Banchero as well. This is a rising franchise, and I'm interested to see once they get healthy, the rite of passage games, right? You know, these teams kind of have to go through a crucible to get to the next level. Once they get healthy, I hope we see that with them in terms of kind of taking that next step within that top 4 teams within the East. So very warm on the Magic.
Just realizing now that this is our third Southeast Division team in a row.
Wow.
A team that I think you and I thought last year, Justin, would do a lot better than they wound up doing. We weren't the only ones thinking that. But the Atlanta Hawks, who sit at 6th place, Justin, how do you feel about them?
Lukewarm. I think the Trae Young era is over. I was really high on Trae Young at one point, but now it's just kind of like, what is this team doing? They kind of feel like Chicago to me on just a little bit higher level. Like, you know what you need to do. You got to move on from this dude and just kind of start from scratch. Like, he's not going to win you a title. He's entertaining to me just because he loves to antagonize certain teams, and I love how he just antagonizes the Knicks fans. That's always entertaining, just in terms of my own wrestling fandom, his inner heel, so to speak. I enjoy that. But in terms of the long-term future, I don't think it's with Trae Young.
Gotcha. Allan, how do you feel about the Hawks?
I feel the same. Lukewarm. I think they're on a treadmill of mediocrity right now.
I agree.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and say I feel cold about the Hawks. I don't know. This feels a little bit like fool's gold right now with them sitting in 6th place. We'll go ahead and stick with the Eastern Conference. Maybe we'll see. We have yet to hit like our first hot team. But how are the Pacers feeling to you, Allan?
They're warm. They're not hot. I think last year was an anomaly. Um, I think they got some injury luck and that sort of thing. I like the Pacers. I think Rick Carlisle is an excellent coach. Um, I don't know what their future looks like. I think they've got to figure out, do they want to be like the Hawks and be on that treadmill of mediocrity, or do they start to try to take a swing at upgrading some talent in some of the areas on the team?
Yeah, valid questions. It feels like the Pascal Siakam thing was like a win now type move, but the team wasn't ready to win now. But anyway, Justin, I want your thoughts on the Pacers as well.
Yeah, not much to add. Agree with both of you. I mean, they got lucky last year. And again, like Allan said, unless they make some huge roster moves, they're going to be in between 5 and 8, for the foreseeable future. And that's when they're healthy. So imagine if they get really, really hit with the injury bug, it could get worse for them. But I think they're an overachieving team under the guidance of Rick Carlisle.
Sticking in that division, the 4th place Bucks. You've got Giannis, yes, but you've also got Doc Rivers. I don't know. It's been roller coaster. Started the year terribly, winning record now, top 4 seed finally. Justin, how do you feel about the Bucks?
I would say warm. Again, I just think with at least Damian Lillard and especially Doc Rivers, they got a lot of baggage. They've won 4 in a row after recording of this podcast, but I mean, at the end of the day, I just feel like it's all going to kind of fall apart at some point, just based on what's happened before. But I would have to say, with the teams that are above them, besides the Celtics, if they can keep it together, I can say they can have a pretty deep run if they stay healthy. Like, I'm not a believer we'll get to it with just the Knicks and Cavaliers in terms of kind of a long playoff series. I think it just comes down to who are your players that are most clutch. And I think with the Bucks, and I understand with Doc Rivers, just his play calling and everything, but it's kind of hard to bet against Giannis and Damian Lillard on the same team. So I would say kind of lukewarm, but I would say if they had tougher competition within the conference, I would definitely pick against them. But the teams above them, I'm not really believers in them either, so I think they got a shot.
They are interesting for sure. Allan, what do you think about the Bucks?
A quick break from In the Lab to request a favor. If you love the chats with Matt and I, please subscribe to our YouTube channel and like this video. Also, by doing that, you get all of our back interviews featuring commentators from the WNBA and the NBA, our interviews with PA announcers, and our interviews with journalists from SB Nation, NBC Sports, and The Athletic, and a lot more. Again, please subscribe. Thanks, and now back to In the Land.
I think I can't wait for the Bucks to go up 3-1 against the Knicks in the second round, because I think it's just gonna be really funny. I'm lukewarm on them. I mean, Giannis is Giannis, but I think teams will pack the paint. I think they'll throw double teams at him in the playoffs, and I don't trust Doc to be able to scheme his way out of that. I don't trust Doc against a Thibodeau defense, or a whatever crazy voodoo Joe Mazzulla is going to do. I don't trust Doc's coaching against that, and I don't think they've got enough to stop Cleveland.
Fair point. I'll say this too. I feel Damian Lillard is actually somewhat of a liability at this point. I don't know. Let's see how it goes. Of course, offensively, he's still doing good things from time to time, but I still think we're feeling the aftermath of the identity change of this Bucks team, and I don't know if we're getting it back enough for me to feel as hot about them as I used to feel, in spite of my love for Giannis. Allan, sticking right with you for the New York Knicks. How are you feeling about Cat's new franchise and the third place Knicks?
I'm warm on them, going towards hot. I think if everything falls their way, they could make the finals. I don't think they've got much of a future, though. I think 5 years from now, it's not going to be a pretty sight in New York. But I think that's okay. They're doing what they've got a shot, and that's all you can ask for. So I'm probably not hot, but I'm warmer than warm for them.
Our highest rating so far, I think, of any team we've mentioned. Justin, how are you feeling about the Knicks?
I agree with Allan, all those points. I will say, and I know this is kind of like, some people hate this about intangibles and things unexplained in sports. And it works both ways, to the Knicks' advantage and to their disadvantage. But there's just some magic about Madison Square Garden. I don't know what it is. It just, it's when teams play, when there's just games on the line, it just feels different compared to playing at the Inuit Dome or in Ball Arena or at Crypto Arena. Like, it's just different. And I just feel like with the Knicks, that magic, one of these days has to go under favor. And that's why I'm kind of, like with Allan, kind of warm, leaning towards kind of the hotter side, if they stay healthy. Because I do think with Jalen Brunson, he just has that Iron Man mentality with him. And I think Karl-Anthony Towns is revitalized in that setting. So, it's just, I have a soft spot for the Knicks just because of that Bulls-Knicks rivalry. So maybe I'm a little bit biased there. And we'll talk to, an upcoming guest later, Dexter Henry, about this, just to see, get some, actual just intricacies in terms of how the Knicks plan on, not repeating what they did last year. But I am more optimistic in terms of how they'll do in a deep playoff run.
Staying right with you, Justin, to their Atlantic Division rival, the Boston Celtics. We know they are stacked. We know they've had injuries as well, blah, blah, blah. Joe Mazzulla, title last year. Can they repeat, et cetera, et cetera? Justin, bottom line, how do you feel about the Celtics? Are they still hot?
Yeah, they're hot. I think the best team in the NBA when they're fully healthy. I think when they have everything going with Porzingis, I don't think anybody can beat them. And it's based on the other top teams within the Western Conference, especially in the NBA Finals scenario. I mean, easily I take them against every team in the Western Conference in a 7-game series pretty easily. And I don't think, despite the Cavaliers having a phenomenal season, I think 7 games, I think the Celtics beat them probably in 6. So, to me, they're a hot team. just due to just their standing, unless unless Brown or Tatum get hurt. And even then, I still pick the Celtics, to be honest. So to me, I don't really see anybody taking them out. Despite, they have only won one game after recording of this podcast, I still think they're the elite of the NBA.
Allan, do you agree?
I agree. Hottest team.
There we have it. Let's move right into the Cavaliers. Can they contend with the Celtics, and do they meet the requirements to be in that hot threshold for you, Allan?
They're hot, absolutely. But I don't see them beating the Celtics in the Eastern Conference Finals. But they're hot, and they could have some luck, but they're just not there yet. But their future is bright, bright, bright.
Right on. Justin, how do you feel about the Cavs? I know you mentioned your thoughts about that matchup with the Celtics, but should something happen, or just in general, do you feel they belong in that hot category?
I think so. For now, I agree with Allan. I think, again, with Donovan Mitchell, is he going to be an elite player in this league? You're the number one seed. There's huge expectations, and you got to go probably against the defending champions in order to get to that promised land. And I think if they get bounced early, if they get humiliated by the Celtics like a sweep or something, underperform, it's going to fall on him. So I think that I'm very curious with Donovan Mitchell. Is this the player that a lot of people have expected from him, or is he going to be overrated? I mean, we're going to find out because everything's set up. You're the number one seed. The Western Conference looks kind of and really there's only one team that's, I think, better than them, and that's the Celtics. We're going to see.
Yeah, I agree with those takes, you guys. It seems like in looking at matchups for the Cavaliers, like they're this team that everybody contributes differently on different nights, but consistently someone is contributing. And I think that's something that we see in NBA history where teams can break that down with strategies in a 7-game series. So I tend to agree with your thoughts about them, at least if they match up with the Celtics and potentially second round. I'm looking at that if they do end up playing the Bucks, like how will they deal with Giannis for a 7-game series, assuming he's around. But let's continue and finish with our last 5 teams here, the top 5 teams right now in the West. Justin, I'll start with you. You have some thoughts. I have some thoughts on this team as well, and I'm sure Allan does too. But the Los Angeles Clippers that we've talked about, I think they've definitely overachieved from where you and I placed them at the start, like before the start of the season. But Justin, temperature-wise, where are you putting the Clippers?
I don't have too much analysis on the Clippers. I think they're always overrated. I think they always will be overrated. They're a team that everybody says they're just going to win the title. And despite James Harden's resurgence, I still feel the same way. They're going to fall apart in a spectacular fashion. Something will happen.
So do you feel, would you say like cold considering their future and things like that, or temperature-wise?
I would say so. Just cold. I just hate how they're very similar in this. What we talked about with the Suns, trying to, put a lot of veterans that they're kind of past their prime, and they have spurts of, greatness. But we know what this team is. We know they're not going to win a championship or go deep. We already know the writing on the wall is going to happen. Something stupid's going to happen, and they're going to get bounced in the second round. So to me, I'm like, I think the way Charles Barkley feels about the Lakers, I feel about the Clippers. Like they got a cool arena. The arena's cool. But I would say just in terms of them as a team, I think they're lacking substance for my liking.
Allan, what are your thoughts on the Clippers?
I think from a future perspective, I'm cold on them because of all the draft capital that they had to give up and they've already lost out on. For this season, I'm warm on them. Steve Ballmer needed a good team for that new arena to drum up excitement, and it's worked. That arena is really cool.
It is.
Fans are showing out and showing up. So I think that from his perspective, and he's a guy who wants to win every year, but from his perspective, he's got to be happy that the fact that they're playing well, because it's going to be some dark times coming for the Clippers.
Oh, very ominous ending there. I love it. Alan, staying with you for the Denver Nuggets, an interesting team this year, certainly, and some positive surprises. A team I still think, and most agree, I think that needs some outside shooting aside from MPJ. But your thoughts on the Nuggets overall?
I'm going to surprise everybody. I'm hot on the Nuggets. I don't
Oh,
think you
love
can
it.
discount a team with Nikola Jokić. And I think Mike Malone's a great coach. And we talked about James Harden's resurgence with the Clippers, but you got to say something about what Westbrook's been doing with the Nuggets, particularly on the defensive end. Um, I think I, I I'm hot on them. I think I, they need some outside shooting. I think they probably need to make a move at the deadline to get that. But I'm hot on them. I think they're a contender.
I love it. Justin, how do you feel?
I am more warmer side, but based on the teams ahead of them and their experience and the way that Jokic is playing, I can't count him out. And I wonder what do you think, Alan, of Jamal Murray? Like, is it kind of are they make or break with him just in terms of having a shot to have a deep playoff run? Because I have a feeling he's been pretty kind of inconsistent. What do you think? Like, is it's for both of you? Like, just in terms of if he can get to a level to where he was when they won the title. I mean, do you think they have a shot at making some noise with a deep playoff run?
Oh yeah, if you get bubble Jamal, absolutely.
Yeah, I would agree. If Jamal can play to that level, I think the issue is that it's a big if. There's even, I mean, some people are talking about starting Westbrook over Jamal
Wow,
Murray because of how
wow.
inconsistent things have been, unfortunately. But yeah, no question, they are. I think I would side with Allen just for the fact that they have Jokic and seeing what he's been able to do, even though Justin, you and I talked, I mean, thoroughly about being lower on the Nuggets as contenders. I still feel that way because we haven't seen Jamal Murray turn up, but I do have them in that contender frame still just because of
Me
the
too.
potential that
Yeah.
Jokic shows. But it is a more interesting team in terms of will they, won't they, compared to the last two seasons. Um, let's go ahead and stay with you, Justin, for the Memphis Grizzlies. I think they have exceeded expectations for most people in Ja Morant's return season here. Justin, how are you feeling about the Grizzlies' long-term viability, though, for future years, and then also, yes, for the playoffs this year?
Very high on the Grizzlies, very high on Jalen Wells, very high on Zach Edey and John Morant. I think with these next three teams, it's kind of like you got to show it to me in the playoffs. I just think it's going to be very interesting because a lot of the teams, I think it works into their favor because a lot of these teams they're going to face they're old and I think they're past their prime. So I think that works in terms of not going through this like tough series against these like real drizzle teams. I think they're going to face kind of broken shells of these teams through the playoffs that will allow them to, you know, get experience but not get like beaten up or struggle. So I think that works into their favor. But I think with the Grizzlies, I mean, look at John Morant. He was at the height of his popularity. I mean, it really just fell apart. And I have serious questions in terms of his mental mind state if that's going to be the same case as we head into a situation. They're the third seed, and there's a possibility they might be the one seed. You never know. And if that is the case, can he handle the pressure? I mean, clearly with his actions, he couldn't last time. So that is my thinking, just in terms of his play on the court. I'm not really worried about, but outside of the court, yeah, I have some serious questions.
Gotcha. Alan, what are your thoughts on the Grizzlies where they are right now?
I would be hot on them, but I think, and just judging by Memphis fans as well, I think there's some concerns or questions about Taylor Jenkins' coaching.
Mm,
Some questionable subs, some questionable play calls, adjustments. So I would love to be hot on them because I think they've got like A-list talent across the board. But I think that plus what Justin mentioned, I'm more warm on them.
I think that's fair. Allan, sticking with you appropriately for team that you discussed in our introduction, the Houston Rockets. I mean, finally, I think fully out of this rebuild and maybe not quite into contention, but hey, maybe so. They're sitting at the 2 seed in the West. I would not have predicted that at the start of this season. I definitely would have predicted playoffs or play-in for sure. Allan, thoughts on the Rockets?
Yeah, I'm warm. I'm warm on the Rockets. I think after this week they've got a home and away with Cleveland, and then an away at Boston. I think they'll probably be in the 3 or 4 spot by the end of the week. Those are tough games, but they could surprise me. I I am warm on them. I think they've got uh, talent. I don't think they need to make any moves this year. I would love to see them play it out with the team that they've got and see, what do you do with this? How do they do in the playoffs? Which is funny because we started the season thinking like, how are the Rockets going to be in the play-in? And now it's like it's almost a given that, how are they going to do in the playoffs, which is a nice place to be. Their future, I'm hot on, and I'm just going to throw this hot take out. I think 4 to 5 years from now, the best player on that team is going to be Amin Thompson.
Wow. All right, you heard it here first. Justin, your thoughts on the temperature of the Rockets?
Yeah, warm on them. It can't be hot just due to their inexperience. You guys would know better than I would. I think they're ahead of schedule, so that's a huge positive. And anything that happens in terms of their playoff run is going to be a learning experience and a net positive, even if it is a disappointment. I think it's going to be used for fuel for the years to come. So honestly, the sky's the limit for them.
Yeah, I think the only thing I'll add, since I love the Rockets, is I'm still worried about like primary option last, 3 minutes of a game, when that pressure gets cranked up in the playoffs. I love the defense and what they're able to do there, and I wonder if that is enough to slide them into contender, but I'm not convinced enough yet of that. And you bring up a great point in looking ahead at their schedule, Allan, and see what they can prove, or if they show some of that inexperience shows and maybe they're not able to handle that. Anyway, let's move to our last team and close the book on this midway point of the season. If you pick anything other than hot, I don't know. I'm getting into this habit of suspending podcast hosts, I guess, but you might get suspended if you don't say hot. I'm just kidding. Justin, what are your thoughts on the OKC Thunder?
Yeah. Hot on the Thunder, just real quick, I think they got a great roster and haven't really been healthy yet. And they're still pretty elite. Again, like Allan said, let's see what they do in the playoffs. I mean, it's one thing to be awesome in the regular season. The playoffs are a whole different ball game with the pressure, and they're untested at this point. So at this point of the season, they're red hot, and I'm curious to see once they get all their players at full strength, what they're going to be.
Allan, how about you?
I'm hot on the OKC. I'm hot on their future. I don't know what Sam Presti's going to do with all those picks because, I mean, there's not enough roster spots for them. But I am super, super hot on the OKC Thunder. For their playoffs, I'm not concerned with their playoffs. I think their number one option has, even with his rookie year with the Clippers, was proven to be a pretty good playoff performer. So definitely want to see him grow there, particularly, Justin's going to make your skin crawl, but, there's comparisons coming out to MJ. So can he do that in the playoffs? We'll see.
Going to be fascinating to find out. So I think our breakdown was pretty solid here. I mean, a few hot teams, which really is kind of the way it goes in the NBA from year to year. Usually there's maybe, if you're lucky, 5 to 6 hot teams, and then you've got the rest of the bunch. So hopefully that gave you all a great snapshot of where these teams are right now, and how you should feel about their progress and direction. Want to close with one last topic, and Justin, I'll go ahead and let you take a lead on the Unrivaled League.
Yeah, Unrivaled debuted. That's the recording of this podcast about a week ago. It is on TNT and also on Max, the streaming service. It is a 3x3 women's basketball league. They play full court. The court is smaller, so a lot of the rules are different than what you typically see in terms of just how many points a foul shot counts. The shot clocks are different in terms of how you win is different, and it has, some of the elite women's basketball players in the world. Had the pleasure in talking to Brendan Glasheen, the play-by-play voice of Unrivaled. We seem really excited about this league taking off, and some impressions of the league I have witnessed so far, because I've talked to Allan about the big three. And I think with Unrivaled, what I like it's a way faster league. I think Big Three is so slow. It's half court. It's very monotonous. And Unrivaled is completely the opposite. So I like that. I like how there's a lot of players that don't necessarily get a lot of shine within the WNBA, getting some love within Unrivaled, like Kate Martin. I think that's pretty cool to see. Some negative thoughts I had. I think it kind of reminds me of the bubble, which I don't like from a basketball perspective. They play in a very small arena. The way it's shot, the fans are not being shown. The camera's shown on the court, and then you see the player benches, and you don't see any fans. So it seems kind of dead in there. I mean, you heard it, I think, the first game where Skylar Diggins-Smith hit the game winner. You heard the crowd erupt, but you couldn't see any crowd reactions. I mean, that's part of sports. And so I think that's something they need to work on. Again, that's a first year kind of deal. But other than that, I really like what they're doing. And there's going to be growing pains with this league in terms of exposure, injuries, expanding the rosters. This is all stuff that's a work in progress. I always say starting your own sports league is the toughest thing to do in sports. It's just hard to do to get new fans, but I think this league has a ton of potential just based on what I've seen so far. They're going to do a one-on-one tournament as well. The pay is really pretty solid with all the athletes involved, and again, a lot of amenities as well. So I think this is a great solution in terms of players not having to go overseas, staying in the United States. And another thing too is, Brendan brought this up, is I think for the first time, a lot of these players are able to be in the same spot at the same time, and they're normally away from each other during the WNBA offseason. So, we talked about, with the, Big Three, just in terms of Miami, how that came about, and just, the Olympics being kind of a point of networking in terms of, organizing in terms of future free agents. I think this could be another spot for that in the future, just in terms of, how many great players are all in one central location just for the W. So I think this league's going to have really huge future implications in terms of how the WNBA is ran. So this is a league certainly to watch.
Awesome, Justin. Thanks for your feedback on that. Sure. And thoughts on the league. Always nice to see another just kind of sports avenue opened up. And I guess I'm really just curious because I enjoyed 3x3 ball over the Olympics. Really got into watching that a little bit more than I thought I would. And so I'm curious to see if kind of that lane of basketball can open up and get more popular as well as people get more and more familiar with it.
I think it can. I think the only question is how's it going to be distinct than the 5-on-5 game? And I don't think there's been a way of really making that distinction yet. I think kind of for hardcore hoop fans, I think it's intriguing. But in terms of just that casual fan, getting that wow moment, I don't know if we've really seen that from a 3x3 perspective yet.
Gotcha. And with that, gentlemen, any final thoughts before we close this episode of In the Lab?
Just check out our past archived. And I just want to make a plug. A lot of our YouTube viewers, they're not subscribed to our channel. So please subscribe to our YouTube channel. Give us a like. It really helps the algorithm in terms of pushing our videos to all the Hoops fans out there. Check out the interviews that are currently uploaded with Brendan Glasheen, with the host of Hello Welcome, with James Plowright, and the rest of our archives as well. To check out our library on YouTube and on your favorite podcast feeds, either on Apple Podcasts or on Spotify.
Allan, any last thoughts?
Yeah, if you're going to trade Zion, you got to send him somewhere where the food isn't good, like Utah or Phoenix.
There we go. Hey, Phoenix willing to do stuff. So,
Right.
so I think you might be onto something there. Gentlemen, thank you as always. It's been fun. For Allan Muenzler and Justin Goodrum, I'm Matt Thomas. This has been another episode of In the Lab with Hoopsology. Let us know your NBA temperatures in the comments. We always love to hear the feedback and have the discussion, take the discussion to the chat as well. So once again, thank you for being here with us for another episode. We will see you again soon. Peace out.